January 20, 2017. President Sarah Palin's inauguration is marred by protests over the barring of over 6 million Black, Hispanic, and student voters in the November election. It all began back in June of 2013 when the United States Supreme Court decided to take the Voting Rights Act of 1965, Dr. King's Dream Act, and rip it up. Within 2 hours of the court ruling, the state of Texas changed its voter ID laws, blocking 400,000 U.S. citizens from casting ballots.
Supreme Court ruling striking down that key section of the 1965 Voting Rights Act has prompted some new moves in Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, and North Carolina.
Within days, the state of Florida began removing 181,000 Hispanic Americans from the voter rolls, calling them illegal aliens. Alabama, Virginia, Mississippi began to hunt for dark-skinned voters and ways to eliminate their rights. 50 years after Dr. King's dream speech, Americans are once again asking, will Black and brown people have the right to vote?
Not in South Carolina. Every election in our state now requires photo ID before you vote.
In total, 5,900,000 citizens lost the right to vote. Someone should have warned us.
1, 2, 3.
And someone did. Catherine Harris calls Greg Palast twisted and maniacal.
No, I'm not. I'm a reporter.
From the reporter who busted the Florida election theft stories for BBC Television, Democracy Now! And Rolling Stone.
And this is Greg Palast at the Republican National Committee.
Greg Palast is back with an experiment in citizen journalism.
This kind of guerrilla journalism doesn't work for me.
With a new film based on his New York Times bestseller, Billionaires and Ballot Bandits. Palast busts open the story of how the election of 2016 will be stolen and who's stealing it.
My brother and I are job creators, and because of that, we're also candidate creators.
Including the secret tape recording of a man named Coke and revealing the Koch brothers' hidden hand in the XL Keystone pipeline.
Are not representing the United States. They're representing Coke oil and they're representing the oil industry, which is in the midst of a hostile takeover of our country. They're literally trying to turn this country into a third world petrostate and a corporate kleptocracy.
From Florida to Ohio to California, Palast gets to the bottom of vote theft shenanigans.
Because I didn't know when you fill in the name that you had to put a bubble in.
Mom, it said you had to put it in the fill in the bubble.
I'm sorry.
We could look to other people that we paid $4 million to purchase this election for the Republican Party. Mr. Roberts?
Billionaires and Ballot Bandits, the theft of 2016. Produced by you.
Hi, I'm Robert F. Kennedy Jr. For many years, Greg Palast and I have been writing about and investigating voter suppression. Voter suppression is real, it's happening, it's a crime, it can happen to you, and there's something that you can do about it.
Make your tax-deductible contribution to produce this film. Go right now to www.gregpalast.com.
Let me show you what I mean. I'm anti-Republican and Democratic if they self.
Will you blow up buildings, Mom?
Actually, you can't. The elite does what the elite do, and we have to learn to be smarter than the elite.
Unless you want to sing Hail to the Thief in 2016.
Oh, man.
Go to gregpalast.com.
Yeah. Okay. Look like I'm fast asleep.
no, don't tell me. They took the nameplate off?
Let's go back. That's the one that has to be, because it goes down.
Wait, someone just walked out. No. Holy cow. These houses look like churches.
We don't even see the house.
There's no lights. There's no lights at all. See it? I understand.
Right over there.
I understand.
Okay?
Yeah.
So that you're out of his sight.
Yes.
Turn around and be, or be, no, you gotta be on the correct side of the road. So.
Yes, oh, Jesus Christ, Greg. I'm not a moron.
You're about to see something you're normally not allowed to see on U.S. television. It's called investigative reporting. The real thing, gumshoe, dig out the secret files, investigative reporting. April 20, 2010. The Deepwater Horizon explodes. On the BP offshore platform, 11 men die. And Gulf Coast shores are poisoned with BP oil. 6 months and 7,000 miles away from the Gulf of Mexico, my crew and I, investigating the blowout, are under arrest, seized by the chief of the security ministry of an oil dictatorship in Central Asia. Was the Deepwater Horizon explosion just a tragic accident or something far worse? A crime and a cover-up? This is the untold story of the Deepwater Horizon, long concealed from the American public. A story of bribery and collusion between BP, Chevron, Exxon, and the U.S. State Department. Within days of the explosion, I received a message from a terrified witness who said it was too dangerous to use official mail. The witness, extraordinarily, was on a ship floating in the middle of the Caspian Sea. When I got to a secure phone line, what I heard was a shocking accusation. The Deepwater Horizon was not BP's first big offshore platform blowout.
BP very nearly had a blowout on the Central Azeri platform in the Caspian Sea last year. The platform was engulfed in a gas cloud following the implementation of the nitrogen cement job, and all 140 plus personnel had to take the lifeboats and abandon the platform. It was mayhem.
A money-saving, quick-dry cement had failed. BP concealed this information and continued to use the cement, which failed again on the Deepwater Horizon, incinerating 11 men. To get the evidence, our crew flew from New York to Central Asia, then to Baku, Azerbaijan, to the shoreline of the Caspian Sea's giant oil fields.
Something happened at BP's big offshore platform, and we want to find out what it is.
BP has given several different versions of the reason the Caspian Sea platform was abandoned, always blaming Mother Nature, leaks in the seafloor, but never a blowout.
First, BP said in a press release that the gas was discovered in the area of their rig. Then the second time, they said that the gas was coming up around their rig. Then the third time, we discovered a document where they said the gas was coming up from below their rig. A leak or a blowout?
In the back alleyways of the ancient Silk Road city of Baku, we searched for the witnesses to the 2008 blowout. Then, among the polluted ruins of the oil fields, we found 2 rig workers who said that yes, the BP oil rig's cement blew out and they jumped for their lives from the gas-filled oil rig. But when we set off across the roadless desert to meet our witnesses, we were arrested. We caught it on our hidden cameras.
Well, it looks like we're going to be here a while. They've called the foreign ministry and they've asked us to turn over all our film. I don't think we're going to do that.
Why? The secret police chief told us proudly in Azeri, BP drives this country. Our crew was released, but our witnesses were disappeared. We were expelled and headed back to the USA empty-handed. But then, another whistleblower released the evidence we needed.
Bradley Manning.
Bradley Manning.
Bradley Manning.
Bradley Manning released 700,000 cables.
I said on that show that we ought to get a hit squad together and shoot this guy. You know how much heat
Deep inside Manning's files, we found the smoking gun, a confidential State Department cable, the record of a secret meeting between the U.S. Embassy and the president of BP Azerbaijan. The oil company admitted that, yes, there was a disastrous blowout. He confessed it was the largest such evacuation in BP history. But the State Department, headed by a former Chevron executive, Condoleezza Rice, told Chevron and Exxon about the blowout. What BP said in secrecy was quite different from what BP, Chevron, and Exxon's chiefs told the United States Congress. Here is BP Vice President David Rainey testifying before Congress just 6 months prior to the Deepwater Horizon explosion.
I think we also need to remember that OCS development has been going on for the last 50 years. And it has been going on in a way that is both safe and protective of the environment.
Safe? All three oil company chiefs left out of their testimony any mention of the blowout that occurred just 1 year earlier in the Caspian Sea. Was the concealment illegal? Perjury? We sought the opinion of the dean of the Pace University Environmental Law School, Professor Robert F. Kennedy, Jr.
The entire government is basing its policy in the Gulf of Mexico on the assurances of this company that this can be done safely, and it's never failed before. This is what they were telling everybody. And yet, the whole time, they knew that this was a process that had failed disastrously in the Caspian Sea. And we have laws that make it illegal to hide this kind of stuff.
When we confronted BP about the cover-up, they admitted they never told U.S. regulators about the blowout. But they did confess to the Azerbaijan government. My question was, why did the government of Azerbaijan work so hard to conceal BP's disaster? What exactly did the president of Azerbaijan owe British Petroleum? To get the answer, we searched for the man in this old photo holding an AK-47 in front of BP's headquarters in Baku. We found him in London. We met our insider at the Oriental Club, an exclusive watering hole for former diplomats and spooks. Les Abrahams worked simultaneously for BP and MI6, British intelligence. The former agent told me that the Azeri regime was installed by a coup d'etat, with guns and espionage intelligence supplied by MI6, BP, and the CIA.
BP were involved. There was arms for oil tool deals. There was a CIA involvement through a company called Mega Oil that was shipping arms under the cover of oil tools into the Karabakh.
And cash, lots of it. Abrahams told me bluntly that he himself carried the bribes to the Azerbaijan government.
Did you feel that you were paying bribes for BP and the British government?
Absolutely, yes. I was smoothing the way.
But the biggest check was handed over personally by Lord Brown of Mattingley, BP's chairman.
Tell me how exactly he did this. I mean, hey, here's a check for $30 million. Just stick it in your pocket. I'm going to the loo.
It was in a brown briefcase. He took me aside, opened the briefcase. All that was in the briefcase was a check.
4 months after MI6 and the CIA put them in power. The ruling family gave BP a no-bid lease for the Caspian oil. BP pointedly did not deny our evidence of payoffs. BP's takeover of the Caspian fields has left a nation impoverished, with blown-out oil platforms and beaches covered with cancerous oil sludge, unlike the American Gulf Coast.
I'm glad to report all beaches and waters are open for everyone to enjoy. I'm still here, and so is BP.
We flew down to the Gulf Coast to go swimming on these clean beaches, then changed our minds. I walked the beach with Professor of Biology and pollution expert Rick Steiner.
Sorry, I had to have that.
This oil will be here for decades.
There will be an amount of oil in the environment here for years to come. I mean, we've seen sites in the Niger Delta in Nigeria where it's very hot, lots of solar radiation, lots of humidity, but even after 40 years, you can still see oil that asphalted over on the surface. And
after 40 years?
Yeah.
In hot weather like this. Yeah, okay, we got a bunch of guys in white plastic and blue plastic and some boats and rakes. It looks like a BP beach party. How many hours a day do you work here? 12?
I done lost everything due to this oil spill. And they don't want to pay me, help me get no car. I don't know what to do. I give up. That's why what brought me out here. Got nothing but bread and bologna in the refrigerator.
Just bread and bologna?
That's it. A couple hot dogs.
And what about your kids?
Well, I don't eat sometimes, just let them eat. It's all right.
They've done about 500 yards in a month, and they only have the rest of this beach and another 600 miles to go. And then they got to do it again.
From the scene of the unending cleanup and unending cover-up, this is Greg Palast reporting.
I want you to take a look at this.
If you want to know why the world's economy blew apart in 2008, this is where the fuse was lit. It's a highly confidential diplomatic communique from Switzerland to U.S. Treasury Secretary Larry Summers from his flunky Tim Geithner. It's talking about something called the end game. This is like a conspiracy nut's wet dream. You've got the Secretary of the Treasury meeting secretly with the CEOs of the 5 biggest banks in America. You're talking Bank of America, Citibank, Chase, J.P. Morgan, and the CEO of Goldman Sachs. It's 1997, the year of globalization. What are they doing in this memo? Why are the boys in the back room secretly, and frankly illegally, meeting? The answer is that they've just deregulated the United States banking system. But in '97, they had a problem. J.P. Morgan was creating $88 trillion in derivatives. $1 trillion! Now where are they going to offload this toxic junk? Well, One way is to force 155 nations on the planet to accept their toxic assets, to deregulate their markets. Now, how are they going to do that? Well, the answer is that they were going to take their game to the WTO, the World Trade Organization in Switzerland. You may remember the warm welcome the WTO received in Seattle a decade ago.
They're chanting, WTO has got to go. It's November 1999. Tens of thousands of protesters took to the streets for the Battle of Seattle. Their goal, to shut down the World Trade Organization, the WTO, the official international enforcer of the New World Order's free trade regime.
In those roaring 90s, Ken Lay was the Elvis of the new free market craze. The stock market got high. It could never come down. Goldman Sachs invented something called naked derivatives. And U.S. Treasury Secretary Robert Rubin, the leader of the Endgame crew, had just deregulated banks, then became chairman of Citigroup, the superbank created by deregulation. Citibank paid Rubin $110 million before it collapsed. Little did the protesters know that the game was already over. At the WTO, nearly every nation on Earth had quietly signed on to the bank deregulation scheme in the Endgame Memo. Why would they agree to this financial suicide pact? To find out, we followed the money.
Welcome to Switzerland, land of milk maidens and cheese fondue. And this is Geneva, home of dictators' numbered bank accounts and the World Trade Organization.
In this gilded palace, I'm meeting with the Generalissimo of Globalization himself, Pascal Lamy.
Assures me that the WTO is not a secret society of corporate plot hatchers.
So it wasn't created just, for, again, this sort of dark club of multinationals secretly cooking plots against the people.
Really? So I showed him the memo of the secret endgame meetings.
Was started. According to this note from Geithner, it's telling Summers, here, speak to these bankers, Goldman Sachs, Chase, now part of JP Morgan, Citibank. It seems that the bankers are at the center of the discussion. They're here inside these wonderful old walls or nearby.
No. In WTO, we don't have cigar-smoking, rich, crazy bankers negotiating.
Did I mention that before he became Director General of the WTO, Lamy was Director General of Crédit Lyonnais, the giant French bank? Despite the memo, he said the WTO doesn't operate in secret.
We do things in the open. Look at our website. Governments negotiate in the open.
Open? So why is this other memo marked restricted, hidden from the public? It's a plan to punish Brazil, the one and only nation that refused to open its borders to toxic derivatives.
Given what's just happened with the financial crisis, isn't that kind of insane? By the end of 2008, we saw the world on its knees because financial barriers had fallen, so that when you have a housing market in California die, you end up losing Iceland, you end up with auto plants closing in the UK, because the barriers did not stop the disease from spreading very, very rapidly.
Interdependence is a reality. And this interdependence has a lot of good sides about freedom, about human rights, about technology, about media, about political, civil liberties. It's a huge plus for fundamental values for at least a part of the human population.
But these folks haven't seen the plus side. Right after Ecuador signed on to the endgame terms, its banks collapsed and hungry Quechua Indians burned down the capital. So why did Ecuador and other nations sign on to this destructive endgame plan? And why not get out of the deal? Ecuador tried, but found it would pay a devastating price.
There's a price to pay to claw back. But remember that...
What is the price? I don't understand.
Well, I mean, if you claw back, if you close a market which you had opened, then the benefits which you've gotten in other markets for the price of opening your market will be rebalanced.
Rebalanced is the fancy WTO term for massive penalties. Let's talk banks and bananas.
Come, Mr. Tallyman, tally me banana.
The president of Ecuador told me he'd like to get out of the globalization jungle.
All right, banana.
But if Ecuador dares to bar U.S. banks,
hide the deadly black tarantula.
The WTO will let the USA stick a tariff onto every banana imported from Ecuador. If the U.S. tallies those bananas, Ecuador's economy will go splat.
So how do we get this stuff? Well, it's just old-fashioned detective work. Sometimes we use insiders deep in shadow. Elvis hiding a tape recorder. And sometimes it's just little birdies who drop confidential documents through the chimney. And sometimes for deep cover, we have to wear sophisticated disguises. Didn't I call him from looking at the iPad? Turns out that most men in Kazakhstan wear Levi's. And remember those photos of me under arrest in the Caspian Sea? Well, they took our film, but they let me keep my pen, which has a camera in it. And stakeouts that begin before dawn. Right, we're going that way, down the road, right?
No, we're going up.
What do you mean, to the right? Len?
Yeah, it's up there. That's where he lives.
I can't see you.
That way.
So I'm hanging around the office waiting for the next assignment, and I get a call from BBC Television London that a group of financiers that called themselves the Hamsa had seized control of the nation of Liberia. Now, what the heck is a Hamsa? I didn't know. Here, I found one of these things in a shop in Istanbul. This is a Hamsa. It's the evil eye in an open hand. Now, who is Hamsa? I didn't know, so I went to Liberia to find out.
Welcome to Liberia in West Africa, where 80% of the people survive on less than $1 a day.
Now, these people are being told that they have to pay $28 million to a bunch of financial speculators known as vulture funds. This was not supposed to happen.
Sometimes it falls upon a generation to be great, an end to the debt crisis for the poorest countries.
Over the past 5 years, Nelson Mandela led a very successful campaign to get rich nations to forgive the debt of poor nations. The West wrote off billions of dollars.
Just as Britain, Europe, and America were about to pay off all of Liberia's debts, down swooped vultures who put their claws on the money. They were waving worthless sheets of paper, old debts that they had picked up for next to nothing. And now they were demanding that these Liberians pay them 10 times, even 100 times what the vultures themselves had paid for this worthless junk.
There was outrage.
I would say to them, do you know you're causing babies to die all over Liberia? Do you know you are making it almost impossible for this country to get back on its feet?
The blackmail that's going on here is if somebody doesn't pay us something that we want, we're going to hold up the development of the Liberian economy.
Where's their conscience? What do they say as a conscience? They don't care.
So who are these vultures? Vultures collect on debts of the poorest nations, but they never lent these poor countries any money at all. So how did these American speculators get their hands on Liberia's debts?
We've come to the offices of Greylock Capital, big players in the industry.
Greylock CEO Hans Humes tells us how he ended up with some of Liberia's debts.
I ended up buying a lot of the loans that we had in Liberia. When I called one of the banks that was going through a merger 13, 14 years ago, I said, hey, by the way, you're a lender to this African country. And the guy said, no, I'm not. A couple of days later, he said, you know what, you're right. We found this box in this warehouse that had files for all these loans. Do you want to buy all of them?
The reason Hans and other speculators were able to buy up Liberia's debt dirt cheap was war. In the 80s and 90s, Liberian warlords were chopping the country into bloody pieces, killing 1 in 10 Liberians. Humes and others were willing to wait until peace could be restored, but for some vultures, Liberia's misery was an opportunity.
4,500 miles away from the mayhem, they file a lawsuit in this courthouse in New York City. Now, Liberia didn't really have a government. It was run by a bunch of warlords under UN sanctions. Not surprisingly, Liberia doesn't show up in the courthouse, and they lose automatically when the judge issues this default judgment requiring the nation to pay $23 million.
Who is behind this lawsuit?
The key figure is Eric Herman, the owner of Vulture Fund FH International. And here he is at a chandelier-lit gala.
Herman refused several requests to be interviewed, so we went to his office to ask why he sued war-torn Liberia. But his office seemed to have vanished.
Are they not there? They were there the other day. I'm sorry.
The nameplate's gone.
There's someone in there.
Hello?
Hi, can I help you guys?
Yeah, hi. Greg Powell's BBC Television, Montreux Capital. It's Mr. Herman's firm.
Guys,
yes?
They don't want to be interviewed. They don't want to be seen. So we're going to have to ask you to leave the building.
Okay. And do you know why they took the sign off their door?
I have no clue.
But we had a clue. He was at his huge gated estate, but we couldn't get close. In the village of Demay, houses are a bit smaller. These Liberians are rebuilding their homes with mud bricks they made themselves.
You're not paid?
Yes, just a volunteer.
You're volunteering?
Yeah.
For the community?
Yes.
Rebuilding Howa Murphy's home costs just $100 for supplies like cement. Howa is a young donut baker. Her grandfather was beaten to death in front of her during Liberia's long civil war, and every house in the village was destroyed. Now, nameless vultures are fighting to take $28 million from the Liberians, enough to rebuild 250,000 homes. The village elder says it's an unfair fight.
It's like someone that is amputated and you say, come and fight me. How can I fight? You tell me, you got 2 arms, I got no arms, and you expect me to fight you.
This is not a fight Liberians were expecting, because in 2007, all of Liberia's creditors, including Eric Herman, agreed to accept just 3 cents on the dollar for all that nation's debts.
Then it emerged that Eric Herman had quietly transferred his part of the debt to a secretive fund called HAMSA.
Under the 3-cent deal, Herman would have received $1 million. But now, HAMSA sued in London for more. And that's how Liberia ended up getting hit with this $28 million judgment. Insider Humes was stunned at what he considers such gaming of the debt reduction process.
All they're trying to do is exploit the system, hold the system hostage to get some sort of excessive returns.
Liberian diplomat Winston Tubman is infuriated.
We see a lot of this in the world. People who sell drugs to kids, people who give arms to child soldiers to go and do what they did here in Liberia. There are people who put making a buck above everything else.
Britain's parliament agrees. They voted to ban vultures from their courts.
I say bravo. We've been waiting for a parliament or an assembly to take this kind of hard decision to be able to bring these funds into reason.
Liberia's President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf.
Maybe the U.S. Congress and maybe, some others in Europe will pick up this gauntlet and will follow the example of Britain and move that, because it's just so unfair to poor countries.
Today, with the end of war, things are looking up for Liberia. There's a surge in literacy. Hopes are rising, but it's all threatened by lawsuits by vultures. The president has a message for them.
Look, here's a country having 2 decades of turmoil, of death and destruction, now trying to find its way back, trying to give its young people a future. You should not be the one to become an obstacle towards the achievement of this. Have a conscience and give this country a break.
When you follow the money, it's extraordinary where the trail leads. We began going up the Congo River and ended up in Sarajevo, Bosnia. Take a look at this.
This is a document from the police files of Sarajevo, Bosnia. Now, I don't read Serbo-Croatian, but this I could read. Debt Advisory International. That's the corporate front of a man who goes by the name of Goldfinger.
Goldfinger, he's the man with the Midas touch.
Who is Goldfinger? We know that Michael Francis Sheehan owns Debt Advisory International, which manages vulture companies run out of the British Virgin Islands, including one called Donegal, which is suing Zambia. It's quite a complex web, and we hope Sheehan, Goldfinger, would untangle it for us. But he wouldn't grant us an interview, so we thought we'd say hello to him while on his morning stroll through the wooded suburbs of Washington.
Hi, Mr. Sheehan? Greg Palast, BBC Television Newsnight. I just wanted to ask you, Mr. Sheehan, why are you squeezing the poor nation of Zambia for $40 million? Doesn't that make you a vulture?
No comment. I'm in litigation. It's not my
Well, you've been avoiding this question.
And here he is again. Goldfinger, leading me to a new flock of vultures up the Congo River.
Now, the British economy may be in trouble, but at least it's not in the state of some place like the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where the average worker earns something like £30 or £40 a month. Yet an investigation by this programme and The Guardian has discovered that an American so-called Vulture Fund is planning to extract a small fortune from the Congo. Previous Newsnight reports on vulture funds, which buy up debt cheaply and then sue developing countries for vast amounts, got the law of this country changed. The vultures cannot now use UK courts. But as Greg Palast reports, they've found a way round the ban. His report begins in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
I'm heading out of the capital, Kinshasa. The cholera epidemic is sweeping the country. I'm driving to an encampment where the victims are cared for in quarantine. It's still a struggle for the people here, in a nation just now recovering from years of civil war.
This place is what we call a cholera treatment center, here set up in Kinshasa, part of the town called Kinkabwa.
They've already treated 8,000 cholera patients, including 11-year-old Idoma Ensako.
He had cholera, but now he's better.
It's simple. What's needed here is clean water. The question is, why don't they have it?
Here's what's happened. A financial speculator known as a vulture has blocked the Congo receiving $100 million, which the vulture wants for himself. In this village, the British government and UNICEF dug a well. At a cost of less than $2,000, they were able to provide clean water, cholera-free water, for 400 people. That still leaves 50 million Congolese without clean water. The vulture wants $100 million. I asked the director of the UNICEF project what $100 million could do here.
200,000 children who have their life saved.
So $100 million, 200,000 children saved.
Saved, yes, very important.
Would that make you happy?
Very, very happy.
The story began 30 years ago when Yugoslavia built power lines for the Congo. They hadn't finished paying for the lines when both Congo and Yugoslavia slipped into civil war. 100,000 died as Yugoslavia split into 7 separate countries and millions died in Congo. Somehow, in all this mayhem, vulture speculators obtained the right to collect that power line debt owed by the Congo. The vultures paid just $3 million, but they've demanded $100 million from the devastated African nation. I smelled corruption, and the rotten scent took me over 3,000 miles from the Congo to darkest Europe, to Sarajevo, Bosnia. I've come here, to Sarajevo, the center of another bloody conflict, to find out how the vultures got their hands on this debt. I've obtained information that the 2 key players are these men. First, an American, Michael Sheehan, and second, Bosnia's own former prime minister, Nedjad Brankovic. The pylons for Congo were made here at the state-owned company called Energo Invest. The company once was the powerhouse of the Bosnian economy. Now police are investigating how its assets were stripped, leaving the company in ruins and thousands unemployed. 10 years ago, the state-owned company was being run by Mr. Brankovic. He became prime minister, but had to quit after he was indicted for corruption. Drew Sullivan and his team at the Center for Investigative Reporting in Sarajevo are the ones that took down the prime minister.
Well, this is the apartment that cost him his job as prime minister.
Oh, what happened? Well, how did it cost him his job?
Well, the government bought this apartment for $240,000 and then said it didn't need it, and he bought it off the government for a very low price.
How much did he pay?
Paid $800.
800 bucks?
Yeah.
So wait, government paid $240,000. A week later, he picks it up for $800.
Yep.
Is that considered corruption here?
Well, they indicted him for it.
Brankovic was indicted, but the case had to be dropped last year after all the paperwork mysteriously disappeared. But at the same time as Mr. Brankovic was buying state property on the cheap, he was also talking about the old Congo debt with a vulture. This is the man, Michael Sheehan. Familiar? In 2001, he signed a deal with the Bosnian Brankovic's people to see if he could get a cut. The transaction was more than suspect. Time to see the cops. This is the office of the chief of the financial police. We obtained a police report, never before made public. It says Brankovic secretly arranged to sell Goldfinger's friends the debt for just $3 million, and that this was a crime. Was it illegal for Brankovic to sell the debt off to the Vultures?
Of course it is illegal. That's why we filed a criminal complaint. And this crime is abuse of power. We have identified the criminal intent, the elements of the crime, and who did it.
So why would Brankovic do this? What's his motive?
We ask ourselves that too.
Every crime has a motive. Did you find any evidence of a motive?
If something is worth 100,000 euros, say, and you sell it for 10 or 15,000, you tell me what's happening there.
If Brankovic is convicted, can he go to jail for this crime?
He must. He should go to jail.
I met with the whistleblower who tipped off the Bosnian investigators. Izet Spahic is a senior army veteran, a brigadier general. The brigadier told us that Congo was prepared to do a deal over the debt. It would include new work for Bosnia's Energo Invest, but the Vulture scam killed it. Did you speak to Mr. Brankovic about this?
Yes, of course, I confronted Mr. Brankovic. He created this whole situation, and he said it was all long ago in the past. Never again should vulture funds be allowed to ruin the work of decent people on decent projects. They're monsters. I just can't understand why Bosnians would do business with them.
The night fell on the Congo. 1 week after Goldfinger got his hands on the debt, the president was assassinated. By that time, 6 other nations had invaded Congo, and millions were dead. So there was no real government of Congo, and no one to argue Congo's case when the Vultures sued. Then, the story switches from Congo to the real heart of darkness, New York City, home of FG Hemisphere. FG attempted to grab the diplomatic buildings of the Congo, but a judge said no. They began to go after any company anywhere in the world that traded with Congo. The Vultures demanded Congo's money be handed over to them. They couldn't sue anyone in British courts because of a new law that was brought in after we exposed their activities. But in America, Courts still permit vulture claims. Congresswoman Maxine Waters has sponsored a new law to halt vulture collections, but her bill has been blocked by speculators led by billionaire vulture Paul Singer. Singer is the #1 New York donor to the Republican Party. Singer tried to stop BBC from broadcasting this report. One of his goons called BBC London and said, "We have a file on Greg Palast." That's fair. I have a file on Singer.
Singer practically invented the Vulture Fund.
Singer bought some discounted debt from Congo Brazzaville for only about $10 million. His company then sued Congo and turned the $10 million into $127 million. Back in the Congo, school kids are waiting for their school to get clean water, maybe even desks or chairs.
What's your favorite subject?
Mathematics and French.
Mathematics and French. This is Congo's hope. This is Congo's future. Unless, of course, the vultures snatch it away.
If Congress doesn't act, $100 million from the Congo will end up here at 300 DeKalb Avenue, Brooklyn, the offices of Vulture Fund FG Hemisphere. It appears to be a garage. I thought we should chat.
Mr. Grossman, hi. Greg Palast, BBC and Guardian. Do you think it's fair that your Vulture Fund has sought $100 million from the Congo?
Yeah, I do, actually.
You do, for a debt that you paid only $3 million for.
Well, that's not true.
But do you know that the transfer of the debt to you was called a crime by the police? Are you familiar with that?
No, I'm not.
You're not familiar with that?
And I'm not beating up the Congo. I'm collecting on a legitimate claim.
You're collecting on a legitimate claim. So that, in other words, the $100 million goes better to you than UNICEF, which says that it could use that $100 million to save 200,000 lives.
Mr. Palast, let me ask you a favor.
Okay, sure.
This kind of guerrilla journalism doesn't work for me.
Mr. Grossman says he doesn't like my kind of reporting. I'll bet he doesn't, because after we ran our report on BBC television, the laws in the Commonwealth were changed. So Mr. Grossman lost his $90 million hit on the Congo. You know, I've always had this fantasy that the victims of these vultures might show up on their doorstep. Can you imagine a group of angry Congolese in front of his home?
We're bringing information to his neighborhood. So we printed out information for people who are passing by. We are going to make sure that everyone knows what he's doing here. We are going to make some noise and chant.
Peter Grossman, you're a sleaze, ripping off the Congo.
They were joined by a contingent who had walked across the bridge from Zuccotti Park from Occupy Wall Street.
And we will be here.
And we will be here.
Until Peter Grossman.
Until Peter Grossman.
A representative of the 1%.
A representative of the 1%.
Gets his hands off the Congo.
Gets his hands off the Congo.
Frankly, as the People's mic was on, I couldn't resist.
This is Greg Palast.
This is Greg Palast.
Reporting. For The Guardian.
For The Guardian. Hey, ho, ho.
We did more than check Occupy's mic. We covered the story from the inside.
100%! 100%! Or maybe at least a little bit more than 50. However it works.
Keep walking. Take your pictures over there.
This is footage of a baton coming down on a cameraman's lens and a cameraman's head. The cameraman was Zach Roberts. The camera was mine. And this is a photo of Zach checking the lumps on his head after they released him from prison.
On the sidewalk. Let's go. Back up. Back up. Back up. Back up. Back up. They didn't even do anything.
Luckily, we didn't have to replace Zach. The camera was another matter. I'd like to thank all our donors.
All we occupy Wall Street. Occupy Wall Street.
You remember the Endgame memo? with Goldman Sachs and the other banker boys. Well, when the game did come to an end and the derivatives went kablooey, Goldman still got its Goldman Sachs, $30 billion from the U.S. Treasury. As part of the deal for their $30 billion, though, they had to give some of it back to the public under a law called the Community Reinvestment Act. And they did. Of their $30 billion, they gave back $5,000 to a community bank. For their generosity, Goldman would be honored at a special dinner alongside their co-honoree, Occupy Wall Street. When Goldman found out who they'd be dining with, they took back their $5,000. Downtown New York, near Wall Street, these are the towers of Goldman Sachs, the mega bank, with over $933 billion in assets, nearly $1 trillion. Goldman has declared war on one of the smallest banks in New York City. The story begins here at Occupied Wall Street. It all started here with these buckets. Unexpectedly, the donation buckets were filling up with thousands of dollars in cash, and the anti-bank protesters suddenly needed a bank.
We basically started out here just thinking we were going to do a protest and maybe some people would come out. Then very soon we were collecting large amounts of donations and we're in way over our head.
Occupy Wall Street chose to bring their bucket of bills to the nearby Latino neighborhood. This is New York's Lower East Side, and this is the not-for-profit community bank, Lower East Side People's Federal Credit Union. Inside, the bank was serving lines of residents from housing projects, bodega owners, other locals, most of whom had been refused service by the big commercial banks. In their cramped back office, the only space to speak with the bank's leader was inside their vault.
So this is our old-fashioned safety deposit boxes that many of our members still use.
People's Credit Union chairwoman, Dayanara Del Rio.
So our membership is 80% low income approximately, and we also have about, I would say 65% or so of our members are Latino.
What makes you different from Capital One or Goldman Sachs or any of the other big giant banks?
We started off when the last bank branch in a 100-block radius of the neighborhood was closing its doors. And community residents came together to initially protest the closure of that bank and ultimately did something very different, which was start their own institution, an alternative to the mainstream banks.
They're holding a dinner next week, and they've announced they're honoring their new big member owner, Occupy Wall Street, to celebrate Occupy's call for its supporters to move their money out of big banks to People's and other community banks.
I'm a customer. You're inside. Yes, but you were inside the whole time. No. What are you doing? What the heck? What are you doing? Oh my God! What are you doing?
23 protesters were arrested at a branch of Citibank following the call to move their money. And Goldman Sachs, which had donated $5,000 to the credit union, threatened legal action over the little bank's honoring Occupy Wall Street. When the credit union refused to back down, Goldman took back its $5,000. The credit union members we spoke with backed their little bank.
I mean, it was a courageous thing to do. They're saying that we have members who are part of us. We're part of the community. We are people-oriented. We are the people's institution, not the money's institution. So, yes, I think it was a great thing for them to do.
We waited all day and night for an answer to our calls to Goldman. Were you trying to threaten the credit union for its support for Occupy Wall Street? We're waiting outside your building. Back at the Wall Street occupation, a street performer showed Goldman's system of the old give and grab back.
There you go, buddy.
Thank you.
For your cause. All right. Take care. Make sure you spend it the right way. Adios. Excuse me, I want my money back, please. Give me back my money.
Oh, no.
Give me back my money.
From the occupied territory, Wall Street, New York, this is Greg Palast for Democracy Now! News for the 99%.
From occupied Wall Street, we went to a very unoccupied field in the middle of Ohio, where once thousands of Americans had made cars.
This was the heart of the American auto industry, Delphi Auto Parts.
This progressive unit has long been the leading producer of electrical equipment for automobile purposes, and in addition, has promoted the manufacture of shock absorbers, lamps, batteries, horns, as well as other accessories.
Now, it's the graveyard where 3,000 U.S. jobs were buried.
So who is responsible for this field of dead dreams? Our investigation led us back to the Congo and the leader of the Vultures, the big bird himself, Vulture numero uno, this man, Paul Singer, and his partner, which according to the documents we've obtained, is the wife of a man who is known as Mr. 47%.
Right now, we turn to a major new expose on the cover of The Nation magazine called Mitt Romney's Bailout, Bonanza, how he made millions from the rescue of Detroit. Investigative reporter Greg Palast reveals how Republican presidential nominee Mitt Romney made at least $15 million on the auto bailout, and that 3 of Romney's top donors made more than $4 billion for their hedge funds from the bailout. Palast filed this report for Democracy Now!
Detroit, Motown, Motor City.
In 2009, the auto industry's collapse and bailouts filled the news.
General Motors, the Detroit stalwart, once the world's largest corporation, died today.
Bailout bummer, the Obama administration.
Bailout is a dirty word these days.
Bailout of the auto industry.
All of the money that has been sunk into GM and Chrysler returned.
Just over 2 months ago, I spoke with you in the same spot about the challenges facing our auto industry. And I laid out what needed to be done to save 2 of America's most storied automakers, General Motors and Chrysler.
As part of a massive government bailout, U.S. taxpayers paid $12 billion to save auto parts maker Delphi Corporation. Out of that taxpayer money, 3 billionaires and their partners took in a profit of over $4 billion. One big winner with a profit of over 4,000% were the billionaires' silent partners, Ann and Mitt Romney. The Romneys made at least $15 million. And as much as $115 million. Our investigation began in Africa, in the Congo. This is Greg Palast reporting. We were hunting for a vulture, a so-called Vulture Fund financier, this man, Paul Singer. Singer's Vulture Fund seized $90 million out of foreign aid given the Congo, which could have been used to end a cholera epidemic. Singer's vulture tactics are now outlawed in England and all over the world, but not in the USA, certainly not here in Detroit, where we found Singer's Vulture Fund feasting on the corpse of another victim, the once world-leading Delco Auto Parts division of General Motors.
Power that can't get old before it's sold. Delco Dry Charge Battery, made by the Delco Remy division of General Motors.
As Delco's biggest customers, GM and Chrysler, collapsed, Delco, now named Delphi, went bust. Down swooped the Vultures. The Vulture funds bought Delphi for just 67 cents a share, bloated by $12 billion in taxpayer auto bailout subsidies. The shares blew up from 67 cents to $22 a share. The Auto Task Force chief called it extortion. Extortion paid big time.
So I ball so hard, motherfuckers wanna find me. But first, gotta find me. What's 50 grand to a motherfucker like me? Can you please remind me?
So far, Romney and partners have pocketed over $4 billion. Then the billionaires gave Romney $1 million each for the Republican campaigns. Nevertheless, Romney accused Obama of conflicts.
This is serious conflict of interest. This ought to be a big story. And I think there are a number of people among the president's team that don't want that story to get out. We want to make sure it did.
Romney said he was opposed to the bailout.
I wrote an op-ed in the paper, and I said, absolutely not. Don't write a check for $50 billion.
But these documents reveal that a government bailout check was, in fact, cashed by none other than Ann Romney. It says that Ann Romney had a hunk of Mitt's vast fortune in Elliott Management, Paul Elliott Singer's Vulture Fund. Working our way between the limousines in front of his office, we wanted to ask Mr. Singer about his special financial deal with the Romneys, but he turned us down. The Romney campaign refuses to tell us exactly how much they made from the bailout, nor reveal their 2009 taxes.
We've given all people need to know and understand about our financial situation and about how we live our life.
To cover up their payday and avoid taxes, the Vulture funds have moved the headquarters of Delphi from Michigan to Jersey, not New Jersey, but the Isle of Jersey off the coast of France, a notorious tax haven. Governor Romney wrote, "Let Detroit go bankrupt," and it did. Of the 25,000 UAW members at Delphi, every single one lost their job. Delphi once had 29 factories in the U.S., now just one. Today, GM still gets its parts from Delphi, shipped from the plants that the Romney hedge funds have moved to the People's Republic of China. For Democracy Now!, this is Greg Palast reporting. Problem for Mr. Romney is that all those workers in China weren't going to be able to vote for him in the swing state of Ohio. So how was he going to pull this off? I had no idea. But then I got an email from a tipster that there was something very unusual going on in the early voting in Ohio. I needed answers, and the best way to get an answer on a Sunday was to go to church. Hallelujah. Finally, it's Election Day in Ohio. Union workers and rural evangelicals are on the road, driving to the polls. Ohio will probably pick our president today, Tuesday, but Democrats hope the election was decided on Sunday. This is Greg Palast reporting. Here, in the economically wounded heart of Dayton, Ohio, I'm going to church because Sunday is Souls to the Polls Day. Today, Souls to the Polls Day?
Yes.
Souls to the Polls Day, when thousands of African Americans in Ohio will go from Sunday church to vote early. While most other Ohioans will vote on Tuesday, a clear majority of black folk in Ohio will vote early. This is the Freedom Faith Missionary Baptist Church, and they will load into the church van to take their singing souls to the polls. Tara Williams, a church member and leader of the Souls to the Polls movement, explains why African Americans vote on Sunday.
Well, because typically on Election Day, everyone works. Particularly most African Americans are probably working 2 or 3 jobs, and it's harder for them to get off that particular day. So early voting hours for our community was very essential, especially weekend voting hours, because that gives us a time to get out and vote. Most individuals are off on the weekends, and so for us in our community, it's easier for us to vote early on the weekends.
We drive behind the church group to downtown Dayton, to the early voting station. And here's what we found. A line of nearly 1,000 voters snaking out of the state building and out into the parking lot. What happened? The Republican Secretary of State, John Husted, cut Black Church Day voting from 4 Sundays to just 1, and just for 4 hours. And at just 1 polling place for all of Dayton, all of Montgomery County. So do you think that this is a good way to do it, where they just have 1 polling place for early voting?
Well, that's probably not a good way, but that's the way it is now, so we work with it.
You know, it could be an hour or 2 in line. Are you up to it?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Can I ask who you're going to vote for?
No.
After the hours of wait, voters were herded into this auditorium, where they were treated to a slideshow. The government crowed that on Tuesday, the day when most whites vote, there will be 176 polling locations. Finally, 10 by 10, groups of voters were sent to get their ballots. But wait, these weren't ballots. These were applications for absentee ballots. What's going on here? Absentee ballots are not at all the same as a regular ballot. In U.S. elections, between 1 and 3 million absentee ballots are rejected by voting officials, effectively thrown in the garbage. Voting on an absentee ballot is like playing bingo with your vote.
Number 175 and under. 175 and under can head up the steps. Stay to the left as you exit 175 and under.
But to reassure voters, or to fool them, this big notice was projected on a giant screen.
Early voting equals absentee voting. Oh, no, it doesn't.
Not according to voting rights attorney Robert Fitrakis, professor at Columbus State University. I showed the professor the absentee ballot form handed out at early voting and asked if this was legitimate or a common practice.
Absolutely uncommon. And I would suspect it's either done out of incompetence, for convenience, or to defraud people of their vote. As you can see on this form, you have to fill it out. And the Secretary of State, John Husted, has come up with a notion that if you leave anything blank, even though it's irrelevant, your absentee ballot can be tossed.
So, in other words, these voters could lose their votes.
Absolutely. John Husted, as the Republican Secretary of State, really has decided that he's going to deliver for the Republican Party, that the only way they can win is by throwing as many people as they can off the registration rolls and making it as inconvenient and difficult as possible to vote, particularly during early voting. It's outrageous. It's a systematic attempt to eliminate the hardcore base of the Democratic Party, and they're getting away with it.
When you say the hardcore base, is there a racial element?
Oh, absolutely. It's the new Jim Crow.
Back at the early voting station, we asked our souls from Missionary Baptist how they did at the polls.
How did the voting go, guys?
It went great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Did it all go smooth for you guys?
Yes, it did.
Beautiful.
Bye. Bye-bye.
I didn't have the heart to tell them those ballots may never get counted.
This is Greg Palast in Ohio at early voting, or early voting suppression, for Democracy Now!
So we busted the game, and their votes did count, this time. But the story's far from over. When it comes to funny vote counting and billionaires gone wild, no one gets close to these guys. I got a tip that oil was being siphoned off the Osage Indian Reservation. Someone was sucking out a few $100 of oil every month, just pilfering the stuff. Now, the FBI and our investigators followed these trucks that were stealing the oil back to a loading dock, and on that loading dock was a big, tall, white guy who was telling these truckers that he wanted them to steal more Indian oil. The man stealing a couple $100 from the Indians was named Charles Koch. Take a look at this. This is just a little bit of my files I've been gathering on the brothers Koch for, about 20 years. When I wrote a story for The Guardian called The Richest Guys You've Never Heard Of. Well, now you may have heard of them. So why? Why was this billionaire taking a few $100 from some poor Indian families? We actually know the answer, because his vice president was wired. He asked Koch, why are you taking the money? And Koch said, because I want my fair share. And that's all of it. And all of it now includes the presidency. To get it, David Koch has teamed up with his billionaire buck buddies. They're hiding behind a secretive charity called, ready for this, Committee for Our Children's Future. Their chairman is our old feathered friend, Paul the Vulture Singer. And they've been stuffing their new hatchling, New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, with huge helpings of unreported cash, hoping he'll build them a nest in the White House. Story ain't over. We're still on the investigation. Come back and I'll fill you in with the next installment on the Vultures and the Vote Rustlers, the billionaires and the ballot bandits.